The Holy Gospel this evening is found in St. John in the first chapter. John writes, "He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of flesh or the will of humanity, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, a glory as of his Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, 'This was the one of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' And from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." The gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. I do want to point out, before I begin this evening, that the text that Phil read from Jeremiah had this line. You may have missed it. "But when things are really good, the priests get fat." And I just want you to know that I carry this around because you guys are doing so well. So keep it up, keep doing well, and I'll keep eating all the cookies and who knows what else is sitting over there. It has been a privilege this particular season to be able to seem like we ate the whole month of December. It seemed like it was Thanksgiving. By the time those leftovers were just about getting done, we could just gorge right into Christmas. It's been an endless feast of everything. So I'll do my part. I'll do my part and stay fat. You guys just keep plugging along. But what's interesting about this gospel text from the Gospel of John, and we've heard this quite a bit. I preach on this text a lot. There's so much into it. I doubt I'll ever completely master it. But tonight I want us to think about this understanding of the Word, and that is what happened in the birth of Jesus, the baby in Bethlehem. Okay, what happened there was that God, in God's what we call ineffable majesty, that is that part of God that we can't describe, that part of God that exists beyond our wonder and amazement, that part of God that just we can't even really get to it. All that God is, God's just greatness, it somehow found itself in this little tiny baby, you know? I don't know what the average birth weight was back then. Let's say, 6 pounds or so, 5-6 pounds. And so this little 6-pound baby, let's say, everything that God is and was in this little tiny baby. And what's so amazing, of course, is that all that God is about, from the farthest reaches of the cosmos to the most infinitesimal microns of our reality, all that God is and was and to be about is in this tiny little baby. And you can see why the people like the shepherds, or more famously this time of year, the magi, the three kings, however you want to talk about it. Doris did a wonderful little number there at the end. Her last piece on the prelude was a variation of We Three Kings, and that whole understanding that what they saw was this God that they had spent so much time searching for. About 10 years ago, 2010. For the first time in the history of the European world, in a language other than Syriac, a little book was translated called The Revelation to the Magi. This book has been around since about the year 300, but it's been in an old form of Syriac, and it has never been translated in French, English, Russian, German, anything. And they finally found a graduate student at Harvard University who was so desperate for a dissertation topic that he took this on to translate this story called The Revelation to the Magi. Now, what this story tells is that the Magi, the three kings who wandered across, that those people are descendants of Magi who have been waiting for that star of Bethlehem since Adam and Eve. In other words, the way that the story goes is that what happens on Christmas Day, when the star of Bethlehem shines down on that little baby Jesus, that the world has literally been waiting for this since Adam and Eve, since the beginning of time. And Adam and Eve are just the first people who ever prayed, if you ever want a quick definition of Adam and Eve. So the first people have been waiting for God's power and majesty to enter into the world in some kind of form that we could deal with. And a 6-pound baby seems like a good start. Now, of course, in my particular case, our kids were pretty manageable up until the time they could learn how to walk. That presented a new set of problems. We seem to have done okay with that. Then they learned how to talk. We haven't yet conquered that particular problem, but it's only been 25 years, so give us time. And, and then, of course, they learn how to drive, and these problems just keep kind of manifesting themselves, and eventually you hope they find some significant other in their life where you could just turn to them and say, okay, she's your problem now. But, however it goes, right, you just kind of assume that you can manage it. Nobody's ready for parenthood. It's not like you sit around and try to tally up, do we have enough money for kids? Do we have enough mental health for kids? Do we have enough parent support? Nobody ever does those kinds of things. And if you did, you'd never have kids at all. So it'd be amazing we ever had one, ever, anybody. So what happens, of course, is that when this God of everything finds God's self in this little baby, all of a sudden now we say to ourselves, well, we can begin to parse out what this God who is God of everything, is about and wants and desires in the world, because we have something that we can relate to, namely this baby who turns out to be Jesus of Nazareth, who grows up for about 35 years or so and eventually is killed. So what John is talking about in his gospel then is that we have to pay attention to Jesus, because Jesus is how we begin to see what this God who is God of everything is all about. He has made him known, John says. Now, you also know that this year is 2020, year of perfect vision, right? So we would suspect that in a year of perfect vision, everything will go smoothly for you, okay? That you'll know exactly what's coming, you'll respond appropriately, everything will fall into place, and 2020 will go down as the best year you've ever had. Whether it's your 10th year or your 40th year, or for those of you who are a little older, 41st year. But nonetheless, 2020 vision, I struggle with, I don't have very good vision, okay? Without these glasses, I couldn't see anything. But what I couldn't see, of course, is the individuals, right? Now I can see your faces, and I know which ones of you are asleep and which ones are not, and all those sorts of things. But if I didn't have my glasses on, I could just see a mass of humanity, because what 2020 vision means is that you have acuity, or you have visual clarity. And that means that on the normal range of humanity, we can all see a certain clarity to 20 feet. And if you have really bad vision, what other people can see at 100 feet, you have to be at 20 feet for, right? And that's what if you had vision, that would say 20 over 100. What that would mean is that what the rest of us could see at 20 feet, or 100 feet, you have to be 20 feet at to see the exact same thing. It's all about clarity. It's not necessarily about distance. Distance is part of how we measure it. But it's about what you can clearly see. Perfect vision is about finding all the little details, being able to see all the little machinations that go into something that creates a flower, or creates a flame, or creates the face of one of your friends or family members. And if you've ever had that experience, right, of in a distance seeing somebody that you are certain you know who that person is, and the closer and closer you get to them, you discover that you don't know who that person is, and you're trying to find a way to awkwardly find yourself veering somewhere else so that you don't have to say, oh, I thought you were someone else. Because as your vision gets clearer, more acute, and you begin to put the details together, you see that the face you thought was your friend is indeed not. That's what 20/20 vision means. And so what happens is Jesus Christ then is sort of our glass, or our frame, our set of glasses, whatever it might be, that brings into focus, brings into clarity what God is about. And as we look at 2020 and read the stories of Jesus of Nazareth, we're not going to find out stories about Jesus only, but we're also going to become clear in our vision about what God is about. This God of wonder and majesty. This God who can find so much in so little, and so little in so much. So that when we practice 2020 vision this year, looking at Jesus Christ, we begin to see not only what Jesus is about, but what God is wanting from us in Jesus Christ. Because finally, of course, although we have a cross, and that stands as a symbol for Jesus, and although we have the body and blood of Jesus on the table, or the waters that he promised to be in the baptismal font, we finally worship God, who is literally more than just Jesus, but God. And we say that Jesus includes all of what God is, but he's accessible in a way for you and I to be able to start to see clearly what God is about. So your goal this year, when you go to church or you hear a story about Jesus or you hear a song on the radio or whatever the case is to try to ask yourself, what do I see God doing here? Now, if Jesus is crossing the water in a boat, or if Jesus is healing a sick person, or if there's a song where Jesus is on a mountain, whatever the case may be, those are all great. But ask yourself, what does that tell me about God? What do I learn about God that Jesus can walk on water? What do I learn about God because Jesus can heal a man born blind? What do I know about God because Jesus is with his friends on a mountain praying? Because the story that John wants to tell us in his gospel is that by looking at what Jesus of Nazareth has done, you're going to have a clearer picture, a better vision of who God is and what God is about. And instead of having a 2100 vision of God, as you begin to participate in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, your vision comes closer and closer to 2020. So as we begin to look at what we want to do for ourselves as a congregation, what we want to do for ourselves individually, as a group of people here in Blair, how we can best make a difference following the mission of God in our lives, it's important that we take time and we look as closely and clearly as possible at what God has revealed to us in this Jesus of Nazareth, the Word made flesh. To find ways in what Jesus of Nazareth is doing and about that tell us what God wants us to do and be about. And as we go and begin to walk through each of these 366 days, of which, of course, a few are already gone, but as we walk through each of these days, to find ways that we can begin to see clear and clear. And then it will be finally a year of 2020 vision. Not only for you or not only for us at the church, but perhaps for the world itself. Because the promise of God is not just for the people who are around a church or around a baptismal font or a table, but the promise of God who is everything is for everyone. Those who are not only around fonts and tables, but those who are not. Those who are wandering and lost. Those who are struggling to find meaning and hope in a world of despair. Those who are afraid of death and destruction, violence and war. God is for all. And as we begin to witness to what we see God doing through Jesus Christ, we will tell those stories. And we will offer better clarity to what God is asking us to do. Not because we've somehow gotten stronger or richer or wealthier or healthier, your priests are fatter, as Jeremiah says, but rather because we have seen clearly. We have seen clearly what beauty looks like. We have seen clearly what truth looks like. We have seen clearly what it means to have hope and peace. And we've seen it because there once was a man named Jesus, born in a manger, who lived, who died, who rose, so that all of us could see together the glory of God. Amen.